everybody, welcome back to the Let's Talk Review Show. I am your host, John. It's been a few weeks since we've done one of these, and today here on the channel, we're going to be doing our January channel director reviews for Frank from Frank's Media Reviews, who's asked me to review 2010's Troll Hunter, and we're going to be reviewing for Mr. Smelly Potato, Kneecap. This was the Irish entry into the Academy Awards for the Best International Film, so I was really excited to check that one out. And we're also going to be talking about one of the front runners for Best Picture, which I was finally able to check out, The Brutalist, and we'll be talking about that with some spoilers and non-spoilers. That'll be the last review we do here on the channel. And as always, guys, feel free to bounce around. There will be timestamps, so if you're only here for the Brutalist review or you're only here for the Troll Hunter review, you don't have to watch all three. You can just bounce around and check out whichever one you'd like to check out. But we're going to start it off with Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews Director's Choice Review this month, and it was 2010's Troll Hunter, which is a Norwegian found footage fantasy film, and I know that Frank has been praising this movie for a long time, ever since I met him. He's always talked about Troll Hunter, and for some reason, I never checked it out, but, this month, Frank said, hey, you gotta finally check out Troll Hunter, and I did, and man, Troll Hunter is definitely by far one of the best found footage films that I have ever seen. Now, I'm also not the biggest found footage film kind of guy. I always have a little bit of an issue with, we're using the lower quality cameras. There's a lot of shaky cam going on because, mostly these people are holding the cameras. They have to make an excuse for the reason why the cameras are there, make them feel like mockumentaries, make it feel like they're kind of making something while they're doing it. The camera isn't set still. This is a big part of the genre itself, and it's just something that kind of bothers me. You also don't really get very cinematic shots. The acting is usually not the greatest, and it'll stand out to me. As far as being a film fan, I'm also a huge fan of cinematography. We kind of lose a lot of those beautiful shots when we end up with a found footage film. Now, there are exceptions, and one big exception is Troll Hunter. I don't think I'd be going out on a limb to say that this is the best looking found footage film I've ever seen. Whatever cameras they were using, they were great. It also is set up to be like a mockumentary. It's about a group of college kids. They're investigating these bear attacks at the very beginning of this movie. And what do you know? It doesn't turn out to be bear attacks. They find a guy, they start following him around. Really cool looking guy, by the way. And this guy's played by Otto Jespersen, who is actually a Norwegian comedian, and he's voiced some character in the Ice Age films. I think it said Manny. But this guy, he looks like a badass. He's got that full beard, he's wearing this big leather coat, and we think that this is the guy killing the bears. But it turns out he's not killing bears. He's killing trolls. Well, he's not really killing trolls. He's protecting the area from trolls getting in. If he has to kill him, he has to kill him. But he's really just there to serve as a guard. And one thing I found really funny, you think, okay, maybe it's like a superhero movie. No, it's also about the government in a lot of ways. Yeah, we're dealing with the Norwegian government, but we're dealing with how the Norwegian government is trying to cover up these trolls. The regular people don't realize. They pay this one guy to make sure, the Troll Hunter, to make sure that these trolls don't end up in populated areas. If they get too close, he kills them. He shines the UV light on them, which will turn them to stone, which is, I love these scenes. Again, the effects in this movie, it's very, very impressive. The found footage aspect of this isn't a crutch. That's one thing, when you don't have a lot of money, you use this found footage thing as a crutch to make your movie. That's why you don't really hire, great actors. Now, the acting by the other people in this movie is just fine, but the Troll Hunter himself, I loved him. His character is awesome. He's a badass. And you understand his frustration with having to hunt trolls. He doesn't feel like he's being paid enough. He doesn't feel like he's being appreciated enough. They even have a whole division of government set up to covering up the trolls. So why is this film crew in here? Well, he says it I feel like if you get this out there, it'll help me in the very end of it. But that also raises some questions why in the very beginning, I guess he's looking for the right group of people. Why is he so skittish about showing these guys the trolls and everything? That's one big trope in found footage films is we have to justify the cameras being there. There's always pushback from the people being filmed. I don't want the cameras here. Why are these cameras here? That happens all the time in these found footage films. Think of the movie Wreck. That happens a lot in that, and I love the movie Wreck, but that's something that's very similar that happens here. These movies usually aren't very long, so going through those tropes does kind of bother me a little bit, but hey, every great subgenre does have those tropes, so we have to put them in here as well. Night vision shots that don't look so great, but for the most part, the special effects with the trolls all looked phenomenal. There's some great tension-filled moments. These characters do actually feel like they're in real danger at certain points. Love that aspect of it, but again, the movie looked phenomenal. Norway just looks like it's a beautiful looking country, very green mountains. I was very impressed with just how good Troll Hunter looked. I did not expect this to be this good looking of a found footage film. And, that really kept me locked in on it. I enjoyed the story of it. Again, it kind of is such a weird thing combining found footage with like these special effects. It's something that you really don't expect, and I really appreciated the film for it. Is this one of my favorite found footage films of all time? Right now, it'd probably crack the top 10. That's for sure. It's one that I'll definitely rewatch, which is also something that's rare for me when it comes to found footage films. But thanks to guys like Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews, I'm actually finally checking out more found footage films. So if he keeps recommending them to me, I'll keep checking them out. But what would I give Troll Hunter on a score of 1 to 10? I'm going to give Troll Hunter a very solid 8 out of 10. If you live in the United States, you can actually check this one out on Max right now. As long as you got Max, it's free. So I say give it a whirl. I don't think you'll be disappointed by it. And next up, we have Mr. Smelly Potatoes director review, and he chose 2024's Kneecap, which is written and directed by Rich Pepiot. And this was the Irish entry into the Academy Awards for Best International Film. Somehow, it didn't make the final 5, which blows my mind, but movies like Amelia Perez have 13 Academy Award nominations, which makes no sense. But then you have a movie like this, a movie like Kneecap, which is also kind of a musical, and it's a true story. It's telling the story of the Irish rap group Kneecap. And this is a pretty modern story as well. Takes place in Belfast, Ireland. And they're known for actually rapping in the Irish language, which is very fascinating. This movie actually is very much dealing with the Irish language and how it's been oppressed in Ireland. Not many people speak it. There's just a very small group in Belfast who speak this type of language, and now they're rapping this language. And what's very fascinating about this movie is my buddy David, aka Shabrock Balls, happens to live in Belfast, my co-host of the Let's Talk podcast. So, of course, after I watch this movie, which, by the way, before we go even further, the movie itself is fantastic. You can watch it right now in the United States on Netflix. I don't know how this wasn't nominated for Best International Feature. It doesn't make any sense. If you watch the movie, you would see that it's very well written, very well acted for a group of guys who aren't actors. Like, the 3 leads in this movie are the 3 guys from the group Kneecap. So it's so fascinating. You got them, you brought them in, and they're not bad actors. Are they great? Not the greatest, no, but they aren't bad either. For people who aren't really trained actors, they do a pretty damn good job, given everyone around them is actors. And of course, you bring in a fantastic actor and one of the most underrated actors, underappreciated actors in history, in Michael Fassbender, who could act in an X-Men movie and then gives a career best performance in Steve Jobs, and then is still bouncing around doing movies like The Killer and decides he wants to become a race car driver, whatever the hell he wants to do. He's always great, and he's great in this movie. And when he shows up, because he's Michael Fassbender, he's so magnetic. You just get immediately drawn to him, even though he's not in the movie that much. He's still so fucking good in this movie. But like I was saying, I reached out to my buddy David, asked him about Kneecap in Belfast and how that works, and he said, yeah, they're very popular over there. Everyone over there knows them. I asked him what the feeling was about the movie Kneecap. David actually checked it out for himself. He said he really enjoyed it, thought it was going to be better than he expected. He was telling me that some people that he recommended the movie to didn't really like it necessarily as much. It's always fun. It's always fun to find out how the area that the movie takes place in, how the people in that area react to the film, Because sometimes, like a movie like we were just talking about with Amelia Perez, which is a movie about Mexico, despite the fact that it's a French filmmaker and the actors aren't Mexican, that's a movie that should be very popular in Mexico, but it's not because you don't even have the Mexican people involved in making your film. Now, this movie, it's made by Irish people. It's got the actual people that the movie is talking about. It's paying homage to the area of Belfast, and it's also talking about the Irish language, which a lot of people might not be familiar with. And it also is just a very well-made film. Like, it's acted pretty well. Like, it actually looks really good. They do some great things with the camera. They do a lot of great stuff with modern technology where we're writing the lyrics on the screen. Like, it looks like pen on paper. Something you've seen a lot recently, but, that's a nice little touch to this kind of movie. It's also kind of a musical, and because the rapping is in the Irish language, not everyone's going to understand that. And it's still very catchy, and it's done so well that you're entertained the entire time. The movie moves along at a very brisk pace. You care about these characters and what they're going through. Like the one character in this movie, like the 2 guys, they're regular guys. Like you can understand, like they love doing drugs and everything like that, which is a really funny aspect of the movie. But the one other guy, the DJ, the guy who wears the Irish mask, that guy was actually a musical teacher, and he has to hide that aspect from everybody else because these guys at the time, especially, they're seen as rebels, and people don't really like what they're pushing, and it's unfortunate. So this guy's got to hide his identity. He's got a girlfriend and everything like that. He's an actual music teacher, so he has to keep all this stuff under wraps before anyone figures out who the hell he really is. but he cares so much about this language and it being oppressed, just like his girlfriend does. But she's going about it the more bureaucratic way of doing it. She's not being like a rebellion. She's going through the proper channels. Whereas he's like, you know what, fuck it. I'm joining a rap group and we're gonna talk about all this stuff on stage. I'm gonna show my ass on stage and everything. I'm really just letting it all come out. And it's funny what character brings up, is this a midlife crisis for you? And you know, it kind of can come off like that. He looks like just a regular Joe, just trying to live his day-to-day life, but there's something deep inside of him that wants to come out, and you can see that passion when it does come out. Like, this is the person that he wants to be, and I love that his girlfriend respects that about him too. I'm not going to go too much more further into this film because I don't want to spoil it for you guys. I'm sure it's a very underseen film, and you should definitely check it out on Netflix right now if you haven't seen it. It's just a fantastic movie, very, very entertaining, and I understand like some people might be like a little bit skeptical because a lot of the movie is in the Irish language. Trust me, turn those subtitles on and you'll have an absolute blast. This is a fantastic movie. It really does upset me that, the Academy Awards are just as political as anything else, because a movie like this absolutely deserves more recognition, and I can highly, highly, highly recommend it. And if I was going to give this film a score of 1 to 10, I would give this one a very solid 9 out of 10. Definitely check out Kneecap. And the next film we're going to talk about is The Brutalist, and this was written and produced and directed by Brady Corbett, who co-wrote this script with his wife and partner, Mona Fastwell. Both of them were actually actors, if you didn't realize this in the past, especially the director. He was in the remake, I think he was in the United States remake of Funny Games. He was in the movie 13, which is a fantastic film. So an actor becoming a director, this is his third directed film that he's ever done. He did Vox Lux, I want to say like 7 years ago, but nothing is compared to the praise that The Brutalist is getting. And I had heard about this for like months now. Now, I live on Long Island, New York. And, about an hour away from Manhattan, but Manhattan gets all these movies earlier. They actually have an IMAX 70mm screen you can go to and watch, but that's like an hour and a half train ride for me, and then an hour and a half back this way. And unfortunately, I work a regular job, so I just absolutely don't have that time. So I never got to see The Brutalist on the big screen until it came out my way here on January 24th. I went and saw it. I had to see it because right out of the gate, this movie was working with a lot of chess pieces that work in my favor, especially being shot on VistaVision, a dead technology, but they felt like this would be the best way to capture the look of the era that this movie takes place, which is just after the Holocaust through the 1950s, when VistaVision was huge, was in the 1950s. Think of such movies as The Searchers and North by Northwest. They were utilizing that technology, so they wanted the movie to look like a movie that came out around that time. I fucking love that decision, because one thing that I always notice when I watch films, even if I don't know when the film, if I walk in a room and a movie's on, I could usually pinpoint when the movie was made just because of like the film stock. Even though they're trying to cover up like hairstyles and clothing, you can always kind of pinpoint the era. Like I could always kind of put it like within a 4-year window of when the movie came out. And to make a movie seem timeless, you really have to go the extra mile. And they really did. They shot this on VistaVision. You bring in Academy Award winning actor in Adrian Brody to play our lead character of Lazaro. You bring in Felicity Jones, another great actress in herself. Now, given this cast was supposed to be very different, this movie took 7 years to get off the ground. And you can see why. It's a very dense movie. Apparently, this is the movie that they had written down 7 years ago. That's why they also wanted to produce the movie. They wanted to make the movie their way. But of course, you start losing pieces, and then you have to start going in different directions. Like, this is an A24 film, but this isn't an A24 film, if you know what I mean. Like, this wasn't made for A24. A24 bought the distribution rights to this movie at the Venice Film Festival, and then they decided that they're going to distribute it. And when you watch it, it doesn't necessarily feel like an A24 film. It feels like an epic. It feels like an epic along the lines of like movies like Babylon, which I love. Paul Thomas Anderson movies like Boogie Nights or Magnolia, like these types of movies where they have so much ambition. Even reminded me of like The Empty Man, where you're trying to fit so much into a big epic film. And this film even has a built-in 15-minute intermission, like throwing back to the days like The Godfather Part 2, The Ten Commandments. I absolutely love that. Go stretch your feet, think about the movie. And it's also a great story tool. It is, we have the rising action of the first, because there's also an overture and an epilogue. So you get the overture at the very beginning. We see Laszlo arriving in New York at Ellis Island. We see the upside-down Statue of Liberty. And we see him arriving, we see all that, and then we get into the first act of this movie. And we're going to start going into spoiler territories in a minute. Not quite yet. I would definitely suggest coming back to this video after you see The Brutalist, because I want to talk freely about this movie. Because honestly, this is going to end up surpassing my #1 film of 2024, I'm sure, on rewatch. Only saw it once, so I can't necessarily right now go back and retroactively change the #1 spot from Saturday night to this. But this movie has left me thinking from the time I saw it. Is it a flawless film? No, it's not a flawless film. There are some issues in the second act. You've probably heard a lot of other people complaining about it. But I think overall, as a film, as a whole, with the amount of ambition and the performances that went into this movie, it is fantastic. I can highly recommend it. I believe this should be the best picture winner. But now, let's get into the spoilers about what this film is all about, because it's fascinating. There's so many different allegories for so many different things in this movie. It's stuffed so densely, but it's all told overall pretty well. But one thing you can't take away, again, here's the spoiler warning, is that the movie looks fucking fantastic. It's a beautiful, beautiful looking movie, shot phenomenally, and we're dealing with an architect in Laszlo who has to flee his country, come to the United States. He's got to leave his wife behind, played by Felicity Jones, their niece behind, everything, and he's got to come to the United States, and he's got to deal with that pain. Big part of this movie is dealing with pain. I mean, as we see very early in the movie, he develops a heroin addiction that's not at the forefront of this movie. It's just kind of going on in the background. It comes, it leads to a big moment in the second act, but, people kind of pointed out, noticed that he just, looks run down, but, it's kind of a part of his life, because Laszlo is also kind of a genius. He's a great fucking architect. The Brutalist is dealing with brutalism architecture work in the 1950s, which is just a very, I believe, simple kind of look. And that's kind of the look that I guess he made very famous in his country, that he brought over here to the United States, that he's going to do. But of course, when he gets here, he starts living with his cousin and his wife. That starts out pretty good, and we get those big moments that you've seen in so many other movies of these happy, smiling moments, oh, look at us, we're a family. But that quickly leads to the first issue in Laszlo's life, when we see that his wife, his cousin's wife, makes up a story about him. And we're going to see this throughout. A big part of this movie is dealing with immigration, immigrants, and how they're treated here in the United States. And again, this all comes to a big conclusion in the second act. But you could just see it. There's always that, underlying tension of, because you're a foreigner, we're going to judge you. Because you're a Jewish man, we're going to judge you right out of the gate. And, of course, just like all good racists, they're not going to say it outright. But they see a way that they could stick their fangs in them. Either going to use them or they're going to spit them out. And that's what leads to the Guy Pearce character earlier in this movie, who we first see because his twins, his son and daughter, they decide, you know what, our dad's an avid reader, they got a lot of money, obviously, and we want you to design the library in his house, his study. He just loves reading. We'll give you the money. You let us know what the materials cost, and we'll do it for you. And they're going about doing it, and it comes out beautiful, a phenomenal looking library. You really appreciate it. It's filmed gorgeously, because not only did they shoot it great in that VistaVision, but also the score to this movie is phenomenal. Got nominated for the Academy Awards for Best Original Score. Now, I think Challengers was the best score of 2024, even though the score fits this movie perfectly. Challengers was the best score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross last year. Didn't even receive an Academy Award nomination, so I don't know. I guess we'll just go fuck ourselves on that one. But still, getting back into The Brutalist, that score just helps move these moments along so well. And then we're introduced to the Guy Pearce character in a very angry moment, because this was supposed to be a surprise for him. But he comes home unannounced. He's bringing his mother home with him, who, this guy's a mama's boy. The only person he really, truly loves is his mother. And that's the first introduction between Guy Pearce and Laszlo's character. But then, of course, as time starts to go on, Guy Pearce is like, man, this guy's a great architect. He does some digging and finds out, man, no, he was a great architect in his country. And this is when Guy Pearce decides, okay, you know what? You live on my grounds. I want to build this big, beautiful community center. And we're building up to this community center being something absolutely gorgeous in Guy Pearce's mother's name. And Guy Pearce, what a phenomenal actor, unappreciated actor. You go back to the early 2000s, he was all over the place, like LA Confidential, which was, I guess, in the 90s. And then Memento gives great performances. He didn't show up again, I think, until Iron Man 3. Doesn't really act that often anymore, and he should really be acting a lot more. Apparently, this was just the industry turning their back on him, and he does a phenomenal job in this movie as just your regular, you think he's just a stereotypical rich man, but there's a lot going on underneath the surface here. A lot of suppressed anger, suppressed sexual anger. All that's going to come out again in the second act of this movie. But in the first act, it's all rising action. Laszlo gets the job, And then at the very end of the first act, we find out that his wife, Felicity Jones, and their niece is going to finally be coming back to the United States and joining him. And then this is the falling action of the movie. Like, we get into the second act, we first see that when she gets there, she's in a wheelchair bound. She's wheelchair bound now. She didn't tell Laszlo that, and she's in a lot of pain. And we also start to see the cracks in the foundation of the relationship between Laszlo and the Guy Pearce character. And this is where you kind of start to notice that Guy Pearce was manipulating Laszlo the entire time. Now, Laszlo, and this is what makes a great film, it's not like he's a great guy, a squeaky clean character, given, the system has railroaded this guy. He's burnt out, he's broken down. That's what they've done. They've basically beat the shit out of him. Guy Pearce has taken advantage of that, so he has a great architect just like living on his property. But then when he doesn't need him anymore, when things start to go awry, and I think this is one of the first big allegories of the movie, is the difference between like the studio and the artist, the producers and the star artist, where Guy Pearce is the producer of a film and Laszlo is the director, and they have to start talking about money. And even though he's like the creator of the film, like this is his baby, Guy Pearce, he's not going to be the one talking about money. He's going to send his son in. He's going to have another guy working with Laszlo on the actual project, and they want to cut corners, but Laszlo has this vision, doesn't want to cut any corners. He's forced to compartmentalize, make what should be like 4 buildings. He's got to put it all into one, which is something dealing with this film is like, this film, like I said, feels very dense, like Babylon or The Empty Man, where we have so many different ideas. We have to cram it into one film. Well, that's what they're kind of doing with that church, with that building, that community center. They're cramming everything into that one building, a church, a library, everything you can imagine. And he's got to make it work, and he's gonna make it work. But of course, he's got people over here like, why don't we use these materials? And another big allegory, using the best materials. Why they chose VistaVision, great actors. Use great materials. You'll end up with a great looking building at the end of it. You'll end up with a great film at the end. But of course, these people, they just want to cut corners any which way they can. This leads to bad things happening. And of course, that eventually leads to Laszlo being let go because the project is going to be put on hold and he has to, pick himself up yet again and move on. But that leads to, in the second act, where we see a scene between Guy Pearce and Adrian Brody happens when they're in a different country. And this, my God, I didn't see the scene coming. And this is kind of like one of the first real issues is like, we didn't necessarily need the scene between Guy Pearce and Adrian Brody to get the point across in the movie. Like, I think you could have cut this whole aspect out. I get we have to show like the pain and anger that follows this and how Laszlo treats his workers, but this scene, and everything that it comes with it, which eventually leads to a big Felicity Jones scene in it. Like, I felt like all those aspects weren't necessarily important to the movie. I like that they give actors big moments, but I don't necessarily think that necessary to drive the point across. Like, I think you already made your point about Guy Pearce and his family and everything and how they treat immigrants and how they basically put the facade on, because another big theme of this movie is the American dream. Like, the first act is the construction of the American dream, and then the second act is the deconstruction of the American dream, showing you that, maybe America isn't for everybody and how we here in America treat immigrants even to this very day. So it's a very topical film to this very day. And that you could actually leave this country despite the fact that it's supposed to be a promise of wealth and, living out the fantasy you always imagined. It sometimes isn't. And you can actually leave America and go somewhere else like they do at the very end of The Brutalist. They leave America after so much pain. And you know what? They end up, when we get to the epilogue, having actually lived a good life. So it was actually worth it for them all to leave this country. And I understand why people don't like the second act as much as the first one. It's all falling action. It's all basically undoing everything we did in the first act, but it all makes sense for what this movie is about, which is the construction and deconstruction of the American dream, with a bunch of different allegories like built in to the point where this movie is going to be endlessly rewatchable, because you're going to be sitting there and just trying to find out exactly what the director and writer are trying to say about this film. The director and writer is because this is a movie that they were so committed to, they wanted to make, and I think overall they stuck the landing. Now, there's a lot of ambition in this movie, a lot of great performances. Again, it's a period piece, it's an epic, it's just checking a lot of boxes for me. So maybe I'm overlooking some of the flaws that other people have with this film, but this is one of the best films of 2024. A lot of us will be checking this out for the first time in 2025. I hope out of the movies that are nominated for Best Picture, given I still got to watch Wicked. Out of all the movies, actually, there's also one more. Out of all the movies nominated for Best Picture, this one is the best one that I've seen so far. It might even end up being my favorite film of 2024. I still can't give it a 10 just because, like I said, there are some flaws in the second act. I could see those issues. I could see where other people would have more flaws than me, but I still think for the ambition and those performances from Adrian Brody and Guy Pearce have to be seen to be believed. And Guy Pearce, he earned that Academy Award nomination. It's It's tough, though. Kieran Culkin is fantastic in A Real Pain, which is another movie you guys should absolutely check out. You know, the performance in that by Kieran Culkin is much better than the overall film, but still, Kieran Culkin's so good. It's really tough. This is a year where, you know, we don't really necessarily, in my opinion, have a runaway in Best Supporting Actor. It's either Guy Pearce or Kieran Culkin. They're both fucking great. You can't go wrong either way. And you can't go wrong with The Brutalist. Absolutely check this one out. See it on the biggest screen if you possibly could. I couldn't see it on that. I'll have to really wait for it to come to 4K Blu-ray to truly appreciate the look of the film, because the theater I saw it in, not the greatest, but I was still blown away by it. Had an absolute blast at the theaters, and I can highly, highly recommend The Brutalist, and I would give this one a very solid 9.5 out of 10. And guys, that's going to do it here for me on another episode of the Let's Talk Review Show. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We also have channel membership, so if you want to become a friend of the channel, a producer for the channel, and a channel director like Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews and Mr. Smelly Potato, you can look for all of that information in the description below. But guys, if you got no money to throw away, don't worry about it all. We just hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, get out in those streets, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.